All right, we're back. It is COMP1004. That's Rapid Application Development here in the fall 2016 semester at Georgian. And we are week 11, part 1 of our broadcast. I want to talk about a couple things today. One is assignment 5. And the other thing is your final exam. And what's going to be, what is that all about? This assignment that we're going to be talking about today is the final assignment. There's no more, right? Thank God. But what it'll do is, it's a little fun assignment that I want to put together. I want to talk about for people who want to use Unity. For Visual Studio, you can do it with C# and Visual Studio. Either way, you're going to be building a slot machine. All right. Now it's kind of easy, but let's take a look at what the requirements are. Now in Unity, there's a couple ways to do this, by the way. One way you could do it is a 3D slot machine, if you really want to challenge yourself, right? And I would give you bonus marks for that. Or you could do something with 2D. So it really depends on what kind of slot machine you want to make. But you still got to adhere to what this is saying, which is basically when you press the button, and you got to use my code, part of my code, to create the slot machine effect, right? So if you want to use Unity as an interface, you're fully, you can do that. You can do so. The only thing I'd ask if you're using Unity is please do a WebGL build so I can look at it really, really quick. We'll talk about how to do that over the next couple weeks for people who don't know. But if you're not using Unity, yeah. No, if I make it the same as slot machine, if you do slot machine, if it's exactly this thing, then I can mark you exactly like everybody else. If I made you do blackjack too, right, or something else, then it's hard, and I have to give the other people an option to do blackjack, which is not fair, right? So, not because I don't want you to do blackjack. I think it's great, but slots are easy to do, and it's a good interface. It's good to get to know the Unity interface and all that stuff, and there's code behind to kind of make it all go, right? It has to make it so there's some kind of functionality. Okay, now if you're doing Unity, you're in a bit of a disadvantage because I can't give you a starter project. But you still have the code, the C# code that you can incorporate into your Unity stuff. But let me go back. We're digressing here. So you're building a slot machine with your Visual Studio, okay? How do you do that, right? There is no event loop or game loop, right? The only way you can do it is if depending on the buttons that are pressed, right? Now, let me go over to Visual Studio for a second. I have an example project that I've already given you. It's up online in a zip format, right? So for people who are using Visual Studio and who are electing to do it that way as opposed to Unity, all you need to do is open up the project. I've given you some sample assets, right? And we're going to talk about what it looks like. So here's the slot machine sample assets. Now it took a little bit of finagling to make this all work. So be gentle with me, right? This was done very quickly. So right now, all you have is this little form with a button, right? It's got a slot machine button right now. The button is actually a picture box, right? And I recommend picture boxes for this project as over buttons, okay? So if I run the project, it starts my slot machine right here, right? Now that's all it is, the form. I click the spin button. All it does right now is do this. Blank, orange, blank. So that's what it actually generates. So remember, a slot machine, people who don't know what it is a machine that kind of looks like, I'll give you some examples of interfaces, right? Looks like this, right? So you have like these 3 reels typically, and I'm recommending a 3-reel slot machine. If you want to challenge yourself again, you can do a 5-reel slot machine. You can do a slot machine that has different bet lines and all that kind of stuff. You really want to go crazy. But to keep it simple, I recommend a 3-reel slot machine. So how does this work? In the olden days, maybe I can even stand up for this. In the olden days, what they really had was, it was a physical box, like an actual reel. So it looks like it was a big wheel, and on the wheel it had plates. And each of the plates had a different image. Most of the plates have blank images on them, right? Most of them. In fact, 40 to 50% of the plates on each of the reels, the wheels, right, had blank images. If you got a blank, it was coded such that the machine mechanics, the clockwork inside the machine, when it clicked together, if you got a blank, it would give you 0 money. Any blank in any of the reels, any of the windows that came up, right? A blank, like nothing. Or it could have been a face that said you lose on the plan. Once you see you lose or blank, you didn't win anything. Okay, that's how it worked in the olden days. Nowadays, in most casinos that have slot machines, there is no physical reel. I've never seen one anyway. Why? Because they can break down. Because the clockwork inside would break them down frequently. And the second thing is they're all computerized nowadays. The odds are done with computers. So you have a random chance of getting the images that will pop up on the slot machine if you get the right combination, then what ends up happening is you get a payout. You have to bet in order for you to play. So that's our condition of playing the game. Okay, so for people who've never played a slot machine, maybe there's people who don't have a slot machine in their culture or their country. And by the way, I've experienced that many, many times. You basically what you do is you press the spin button, but only if you have a bet amount. A bet amount is an amount that you kind of put up. It's an amount of credits, usually. And if you bet whatever it is, $10 to $500 or whatever it's going to be, if you get the combination, for example, in this case, you have cherry, grape, grape, as an example, that would be a win because it's all fruits, right? In my version of the slot machine. Now, you can make your own custom images. If you want to make a themed slot machine, I would give you a bonus for that. It means you have to get your own assets, right? As an example, instead of using mine, right? So let's say if you want to make a Star Wars slot machine, right? So if you get Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia and Han Solo, I'm giving you this idea, that's the theme, and that's the images that come up in the reels, it's a win, right? But if you get like, the Empire a couple of times, right? Or, TIE fighters, or however you want it, it's a lose, right? They caught you, right? You can make your own theme slot machine if you want, or you can use the images that I've given you. So that's how slot machines work. Now, the chances are that you're going to get blanks, and any blank that appears or any loss that appears in any of the reels is a loss. It's not a match, right? So now we're talking about probabilities. Now, does anyone know about, have you guys done any probability kind of stuff in math? Yeah? You guys have done it? Okay, for anyone not do math probabilities?
Starting next week.
Starting statistics next week? All right, so this hits math. So people who have never done probabilities, and I'm just gonna put it out there. If I roll a die that's a 6-sided die, right? What's the chances that one of the faces are gonna come up? 1 out of 6. In fact, the reason why is because it's equal chances, right? As long as the die is weighted correctly, and it's not a trick die or something, right? Or I haven't shaved one part off so that the other part kind of lands the other way, right? It's not a fake die or cheat die. It's going to have equal chances, right? From a programming perspective, when I do a random number, right, it's got equal chances, right? So if I do random next and I go from 0 to 6 plus 1, it goes from 1 to 6. That's the number that it generates, right? Equal chances. That is called a uniform probability, right? Because if there's equal number of chances for me to get any of the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I take 2 dice, in D&D, it's called 2d6. That's just the short form of saying it, right? 2 dice, and I roll them together, right? So I have 2 6-sided dice now. It's no longer a uniform probability because 7 has a higher chance of being rolled than any other number because of all the combinations. 3 and 4, 4 and 3, 1 and 5, 2 and 2 and 5. 1 and 6, and so on. It generates 7s, right? So 7s has the highest chance of coming out, and around 7, 6, and 8 have the second highest chances. The lowest chances for something to be rolled is a 2 or a 12, right? So that is like, it looks like a bell curve, this probability, and that's called normal probability, right? Okay, here, what's the probability? We have three reels. Now try and calculate this in your head, right? We have 3 reels. For me to get one of the numbers in the reels, right, as an example, it's not a uniform probability because what I've done in my code, if you look at it in a second, is there's a 40% chance, right? So a range of numbers between, let's say, 0 and 40, that if I roll, it's going to be blanks. So you're going to get 40 blanks out of 100 rolls, let's say, in each reel, right? And each of the fruits have different chances. If you get a 7, 7 is like, I think it's 2 out of 65 or something like that to get a 7. Now, if you calculate the chances of you getting a blank in each of the reels, and there's 40 blanks in each of the reels, how do you calculate your chances of probability? It's very hard, right? But I'll tell you right now, most times you're going to lose. That's the answer. And that's what it's like in real life. If you go, well, maybe not these chances, but if you go to a casino and you play the slots, chances are you're going to lose. And you're going to lose often. Most likely, at least, if you think about the chances, more than 60% of the time, you're going to lose, right? The house is going to win. Now, there's a chance you might win a little bit, but most of the time, you're losing. So if you play long enough, right, you're probably going to lose all your money, right? That's why slot machines work, right? And for the casino, not for you, right? In fact, all games of chance are rigged or they're set up so that the house wins. Some games of chance have better odds. Example, blackjack, is a little better odds than any other game, right? Or if you're playing, if you're a really good player with, with Hold'em or something like that, you have a higher chance of controlling the game. But for the most part, most games of chance in a casino or any other kind of thing like that is for the house. Lifetime gamblers are down. No one's a winning gambler. Lifetime, right? Why? Play long enough, you're going to lose everything. That's just the way it is. That's why, don't do drugs. No, I mean, don't gamble. I don't know. What's the message there? But anyways, the probability is what we're talking about here. And I've created the chance of the probabilities inside of your code. So if we go to the example project, when I go blank, orange, blank, that's the result that would happen on the reels. I don't have an interface. You have to build the interface for my code, right? That's the challenge for this assignment, right? So you get a result, right? Blank, orange, blank, and you're going to have to translate that result into images that are going to appear in 3 reels. Okay? Now, if I press OK, it's going to say you lost, right? Because blank, orange, blank is a loss, right? Any blank inside the line, loss. I press OK. It tells me the statistics. My loss ratio is 100%, right? I've got $5,000 on my jackpot. My player money is now $990. Why? Because I've set a default of $10, right, every time you bet, right? In the real game, you're going to have the player set a bet amount, right, with buttons, like not entering physical, like actual numbers in, but pressing a button like you would in a real casino. So in other words, in a real casino, you might have some buttons like this, right? So you see that you have some buttons here. You might have some buttons on the actual machine itself, right? And when you press the buttons, you can actually bet. You wouldn't put in coins or enter a physical number. It doesn't happen in a casino. So too here, you would probably select the bet amount 1, 5, 10, 20. Quick spin. Whatever happens here, if you win, you get a ratio back of winnings. If you lose your money. Chances are you're going to lose your money, right? So if you go back here I've lost $10 because I've set the bet amount by default in my code to 10. And I'll show you where that all is because we're going to go over the code a little bit so you understand. So I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to spin again. Orange, blank, blank. Loss, right? Because there's a blank in the options here. And it tells you lost. You lost. I've got $980. You see how it's going down by $10 every time. The second turn, 2 losses, 100% loss ratio, right? Again, let's keep going. If you can try this out, download the code. You can do it for yourself right now if you want to check it out, right? Grapes, banana, orange. What's this? It's a win, right? You won $10, right? Straight money. You won your money back pretty much, right? Okay, so now I have $990. It's 1 win, 2 losses. My ratio is 32% wins and 66% losses. And we can keep going like this, right? That's a loss, right? Let's try it again. That's a loss. That's a loss. You can see where we're going with this, right? That's a loss. But these numbers, all this thing does is in a series of message boxes, basically tells you statistics, whether you won or lost, and all this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, this is not what I want. I don't want you to make message boxes pop up to show me it's going to be a slot machine. So how do you do that? On the back of your form, I want you to make a slot machine graphic, right? Put a slot machine graphic back here. Or if you really are bad at doing that somehow, make it look like a slot machine with Visual Studio. You can put in some boxes or whatever, color it the way you like, right? At the very worst. But I want all the output to be on the form, right? So when I click the button, right, the output's got to be here. Let me take a look of what this thing looks like on the back end, right? So for you guys, so you understand. So here's my form. Now, why am I getting you to do this? Because on the exam, I'm going to give you code that you've never seen before. And I'm going to say, complete the code. And if I've never given you an example like this, then you're like, Tom, I've never seen somebody else's code. By the way, the code is bad, right, on this stuff. This is like brute force code because I just wrote it in like an hour, right, kind of thing. So I haven't had a chance to go through it, optimize it, none of that. It just works, right, for what it is. So, and let's take a look. So if I go to view my code, you can see that I got a bunch of private variables that I use, right? I've got player money, which is $1,000. That's what you start off with. Your winnings, your jackpot, which starts off at $5,000, right? Your turn, how many turns you have, which is a float. The reason why I want to do this is because it makes easy calculations, right? How many wins and losses? Now, do I really need all of this stuff? Not in the end game. I don't care about statistics when you do your slot machine at all. This is for you to know, to understand that that your code is working. And for debugging purposes, you can leave it on. But when you're done debugging and you know that the loss ratio and everything else is still working, turn it off. I don't care about seeing statistics. This is for you guys, for you to debug your code. That's why I made these extra things here. Like, do I really care how many turns I have? No, I don't care. And the computer doesn't care either. Do I care how many win numbers or loss numbers I have? No, I don't care to see those things. You can still calculate those things and leave them in place. Just don't show me, right, in the final result. I have a string array, which is the spin result. So when I calculate my spin result, I'm actually calculating one of the objects. And let me take a look at that. So right now, if I go back to the spin, here's my spin button, right? My spin button says this. My default player bet is $10. I can change it here in my code. It's hard-coded right now. You could change this number with a little control, right? And I recommend making buttons, like bet 1, bet 2, bet 3, bet 4, and so, or bet 5, or whatever it is going to be. And then what you do is, it says if my player money is equal to 0, so if I've run out of money, display a message box that says, hey, you've run out of money. Do you want to play again? Yes? Reset all and show my player stats, right? No? Well, you can't play because until you have money to play with, right? Else, if the player bet is greater than the player money, so if I'm trying to bet more than what I have, let's say, for example, I have $100, but I'm trying to bet $500, right? It's going to say, hey, you don't have enough money, right? And if my player bet is less than 0 somehow, right? Like, I don't know, I bet a negative amount somehow, and this is just by default is in there. It's like, it can't be a negative amount, negative bet, right? So I've taken those into account very quickly. If my player bet is less than or equal to the player money, so I have enough money, right? Then spin the reals, man. Call the reals function, which returns a spin result. The spin result is actually a string array, or a string itself. So here's the spin result. It's a string array, right? Because I have 3 different strings, banana, blank, banana, let's say. Those are 3 strings, and I'm combining them to create my bet result. That's what happens. That's how I'm doing it, right? Now, this is one method. You can use many methods to do the same thing. And if you want to change my code, so be it. As long as the ratios of winning and losing are the same, don't care, right? I'm giving you something to work with so you don't have to generate this code by yourself, right? I'm not forcing you to use this code. I recommend it because it'll save you time. That's all I'm saying, right? But if you don't understand it, and this is the trouble when you're giving code, you're like, okay, what the hell does this code do? I don't understand. So here you're getting a spin result, which is a string array. A string array, that means there's 3 values. So, you know, spin result 0, spin result 1, spin result 2, because each of the reals, right, are going to give you, you know, an element that has, it's going to be enough for each reel to have a result, right? That's why I did it this way. So an example in the reals method, here's the reals method. It's going to say, okay, let's create a bet line. The bet line is going to start off with nothing. So we're initializing this string array called bet line to empty strings, nothing, basically. And then I'm also going to generate an integer array that's called outcome that has nothing in there as well. I need both because I want to keep track of 2 things. I want to know what I rolled and how much I won, right? Because that's how I calculate if it's a win or loss, right? Now, in previous iterations of this code, I would have used a case, switch case, right? Can't do it in this case so easily. I'd have to rework this code. I didn't have time, so I made if structure. But I would definitely use a switch case. Notice that the probability of getting a blank, I've calculated around 41.5%, right? And so on. Now this is 41.5% per reel, right? Per little window that comes up. Okay, so if the result is between 28 and 37, as an example, then it's going to be grapes. If the result is between 38 and 46, then it's going to be a banana, right? And so on. So the only chance you have to get a 7 is if you roll 65. If you don't roll 65, that's one chance out of 65 chances, right, to get a 7. Now, what I also do is I also increment, I tally how many of these results are here without using regular expressions, right? So then I would have to search how many grapes, how many bananas, how many 7s in that string result. Instead of doing that, I just tallied. How many bananas, how many grapes, how many oranges. Nice and easy, right? And then what happens is at the end, it returns the string array, the combined string array that says banana blank banana, as an example, or whatever it's going to say at the end. That's what it returns. It returns a string array or a reference to a string array. Okay. So going back to this code, right? So here's my, when I roll, this calls the reals function, which generates the string array, whatever it is, and returns it inside this spin result variable. Then what I do is I break it out. I say fruits then is equal to spin result 0. So it's one big string. Now, I basically combine the elements from the string array into one string by separating them out. I take the spin result 0, 1, and 2, and combine them into something called fruits. These are the resultant fruits, if you will. And then I output this in a message box. So I show you what you rolled, right? Now I determine the winnings. Now this is a very complex thing as well, because to determine the winnings, I do something like this. Well, if I have no blanks, that's the first thing I check, because if I have a blank, it's a loss. So I check to see if there's any blanks. If there's a blank, skip all this. If there's no blanks, however, okay, cool. So he won something, this guy, or this girl. Well, what happens? If they have 3 grapes, player bet times 10. That's what they return. That's what their winnings are, right? If 3 bananas, player bet times 20, and so on. As you can see, if they have 3 of anything, 3 of a kind, right? For example, if they have 3 sevens, right down here, right? Here, 3 sevens, right? If 7 is equal to 3, then 100 times your bet you get back, right? If you have only 2 grapes, as an example, so 2 of a kind, then you get twice your bet, or 3 times your bet, or 4 times your bet, and so on. And if you only have a 7, if you have 1 7, regardless, if you get a 7 in your line with any other fruit, you're going to get 5 times your bet, right? And worst case scenario, if it's none of those combinations, if it's a combination of bananas and grapes and blah, 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 you're just going to get your money back. That's what this is, right? And I'm doing that because I've tallied how many of those things I've done. Could I do this differently? Sure. You could use regular expressions to let me know how many are inside that string, in the string that I'm returning here. But for you guys, it's okay. I just put it this way so you can see it, and it's a little bit more clear of what I'm doing here. So this is what generates the winnings, which is held in a variable. Now I calculate if I won. I increase my win number, how many times I won, right? And I show the win message. Hey, you won. Do I have to do that when the final result? When you come up with your final slot machine? No, I don't want you to come up with message boxes. You have an interface. Make the interface do all the talking for you, right? If you want to show that someone's won, put a little message or some kind of label that says you won, right? On the interface. That's up to you to do, not to me, right? If you lost, increase the loss number and show your loss message. Again, I wouldn't want to show your loss message, a message box that pops up and says, hey, you lost. Don't do that. Because in real life, you won't have that little pop-up in 3-dimensional space unless, one day we have augmented reality and it comes up in our vision, right? So it's going to be on the slot machine itself. There's going to be some kind of message that says, you lost, right? And that's really what calculate winnings does. It just calculates if you lost or won, how much you lost or won, right? And so on. And also increases, it retallies your statistics for your slot machine. All right, so that's what this line does, and this line, right? I increase the turn because every time the player takes a turn, it calculates the winnings, right? It calculates the percentages. And then I show my player stats. Do I need to show my player stats? No, you turn this off when you figure out the final amount. And by the way, this can be completely restructured, this whole thing. I've just made it work so that when I press the button, it does something right now. Your job is to make this look like a slot machine and operate like a slot machine while using my code, like the back end. Without you having to figure out how to make a back end, I've given you the back end. Use it and pump it out to the interface. That's your job. Okay? So, details. It tells you what to put in. I need 3 picture box controls in the main form, 1 for each reel, right? Tells you what to do here. A spin button or a picture box control for your form. I recommend, instead of buttons, for this application, you use picture boxes. Why? They have more control over what you're going to show, right? You can still double click on them. If I click on a picture box or I click on a button, it still creates the click event, right? So it doesn't really matter what you do with them. The only thing with it is there is no feedback to the user that you're hovering over the button. And if you were to create that little thing, like those kinds of, and I've given you buttons to do that. Like for example, if I hover over over the picture box, I don't know if you kind of change the opacity or something like that from a hover event, and you can do that. We're going to talk about how to do those kinds of special effects today, right? When we create some controls. Sorry. You can do that too. So if I hover over a button, then I can sit there and go, I'm on hover. When I'm hovering over, it's an event, right? An event type. It'll raise the event, the hover event. And if I hover over a button, if my mouse is over a control, you can listen for it, and you can respond to the event. For example, swap out the image, take the image and change it to something else, or change the opacity from 100% to 80%, so it looks like it's you can see through it. I'm hovering over it, and I'll show you how that works. Or you can even change the size of the button, make it so it goes from 100% to 80%. So it makes it smaller or bigger, right? That's right. And I've actually given you images. If you want to swap the image, I've given you images so you can swap it so it looks like pressed or unpressed, right? Lots of ways to do this kind of stuff. But I'm giving you the way to do it. Like I said, this application I've given you assets that you can use. You don't have to hunt for them, okay? It's there. All you have to do is put them together and create the interface, all right? All right, so again, a button or picture box control that allows your user to reset the game. How do I reset the game? Click reset. There's a reset button, right? A button or picture box control that allows the user to quit the game. So what does that mean? Make sure that they can quit the game not just from the X, but also somewhere on the actual form itself, right? Labels, add labels or other appropriate controls to display the user's money, the current jackpot, and the current bet. All right, because you want to display all that stuff. You don't want to give statistics or pop-ups, right? You want to make it all inside the form itself. So I didn't tell you how many labels. That's up to you. Use a number of labels that you require to make this thing look good, right? Several buttons or picture box controls to allow the user to enter a bet, and ensure that when the user enters a bet amount, that the program validates if he has enough money. If the user doesn't have enough money to make his bet, then gray out or disable the spin button, right? Somehow, to prevent him from playing the game, because if he doesn't have enough money, he can't play. We don't want anyone playing for free or winning free money, right? And actually, it would fail, because if you're not betting anything, then the calculation would not calculate anything. It'd be zero. Include conditions that allow the player to potentially win the jackpot. This is something else that I've kind of generated. The jackpot starts off at $5,000, right? So if the guy wins, if he gets a win, there's a chance every time he plays that he wins the jackpot, even if he wins his money back, right? It's actually the way it's done in real casinos. They have a progressive, is what it's called, right? And you pay an extra $1 or whatever time. Every time you play an extra coin or something like that for a chance to win $100,000. That's what it's really like, right? And you have an extra slot where you play the progressive, right? So here we're emulating that. And the way I've done that in code is I check to see, when I determine the winnings, I also check to see if he's won the jackpot. So if you go back up to check jackpot, it says this. I've got, and this doesn't have to be var, it could be actual integers. I'm generating a number between 1 and 51, all right, as an example. And there's a reason for this. If my jackpot try and my jackpot win matches, so if I roll two numbers and they're the exact same, it's a jackpot. Like, it's so easy to do. Now you can obviously modify these odds, these percentages, by rolling other numbers, like from 1 to 1,000. So both have to be 1,000 for you to win. You know, the odds are, chances are you won't win the jackpot. It should be like something crazy, like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 20,000, right? Here I'm making it so you can possibly win the jackpot. That's why it's 1 in 50, right? For each one, right? Okay, so if these two numbers equal each other, so both numbers that I rolled are the same, then you won the jackpot. And what I do is I say the player money adds the jackpot to the player's money, and then I set the jackpot back to 1,000, not to 5,000. So it kind of goes down a little bit. When the player loses, this is another thing that happens. Here's what happens with the jackpot. And this is all stuff that I've set up, right? So, I mean, again, you could make your game slightly different if you really want to. But let's suppose that the player loses, and I have all this functionality in here, right? So here's my player stats and so on. And I do a reset all where I calculate the jackpot and do all that stuff again, right? Yeah, this looks okay. Sorry, and again, if you find errors, guys, it's not, I didn't mean to give you errors. Like I said, it's a bit of a slap job when it came to putting this together for you. It works, right? But it's okay. So here's my show win message if I win, right? And I check the jackpot, right? And here's my show loss message, right? If I lose, what do? I take the player money and I subtract the bet, okay? I subtract the bet here. Now, what you could do is you could add this up to the jackpot. You could add whatever the loss is to the I didn't do that here, but you can add the loss amount to the jackpot. So it always seems to be increasing, right, if you really want to. Okay? And that's really it. I mean, the code is not that complex. Okay. The last part is this. Even though I've included a graphic, it's tricky sometimes to make the jackpot, the slot machine graphic work, because of Windows 10 and its funky ways, right? For you to position your form to work properly so that all the form controls are layered on top of the background image, and for them to stay in that position, it's tough. So I'm giving you 2 marks for this, right? To make it happen, you need to add some kind of backdrop to your slot machine, right? So that looks like a slot machine, and I've included an image for that. An example would be inside of your resources folder. Inside the project, I have all these images. Here's all the images for the slots. They're all there for you, right? And even the bet amounts, the bet buttons, they're all there for you too. I've designed all these things very simply, right? Well, other than some of them, like the bar, I didn't do this one, but all the bet buttons and all that stuff was me. And what happens? You also have a few spin. The spin button was me. I got the spin button. I also did this where you have no credit. So if you don't have enough money, you can swap out the spin button and make it so there's no credit, right? Instead of disable, right? You can do that too. And I've also given you the spin pressed. So if you want to swap out the spin button when the spin is pressed, what it looks like, or when you're hovering over it, you can do that. You can swap it out instead of graying it out or something like that, right? So all the assets for what you need are here inside the application. There's nothing for you to go hunt. However, again, if you really want to challenge yourself and you want to make a themed slot machine, all the power, right? If you're someone who wants to use Unity, I got to talk about this a little bit too, because there might be some people who want to use Unity to create their game, right? It's an option. I know some people love Unity, some people hate Unity, right? And they're not gamers or whatever. That's why I gave both options the same amount of points. It's worth the same. I'll tell you that the Unity build, in some ways, will be more difficult, right? Because you have to incorporate all the calculations somehow, right? Somehow it's going to generate the slot machine for it to work. And the way to do that, of course, is to set up an empty game object, or create a game controller that keeps track of all this stuff. It's a little tricky to do, but it's not impossible. And I'll be talking about this over the next couple of weeks, right? Because in class, I'm going to give you some time in class over the next couple of weeks to do this thing, right? Because there's some tricky parts about it. You know, it looks easy, but it's always the devil's in the details. I hate to say it that way, but really it's true, right? Okay, so that's this project. Any questions around this? This thing's due like last day of class, or sorry, the day after last day of class, which is the Friday, December the 16th at midnight. Last day of semester, right? Now, if you want to hand it in early, you know, that's fine too. You don't have to wait till then, but it's 20% of your final grade. It's you on your own doing this thing, right? And it's not a difficult project. It's not something that you can look at and go, wow, this is a database and I got to save it to file. Like this next one, the one that you're doing right now for Dollar Computers is more difficult than this one. This is just taking my code and making it work on creating a user interface for my code. And that's the challenge. That's what this project's all about. You don't have any user interface. There's no design. You know, you design it, right? And because now it's kind of integrating all the things that you've learned about user interfaces over the course of the semester to build your user interface to make this slot machine work. Yeah.
So we've been shown how to add images and everything into the resource.
Yeah.
Will you be showing us how to add font?
A font?
Yeah.
Sure, if we want to. It's not that difficult to do. Yeah, you can even use things like Font Awesome and stuff like that if you really care to. Yeah. There's Font Awesome for ASP.NET and .NET Core, all that stuff. It's all there. So Font Awesome works for, if you really want to use font buttons or whatever, you can do that too. If you want to make other fonts happen, like actually add in fonts, it's usually system fonts. But the problem is if you use a system font that doesn't exist in somebody else's machine, it's going to default to the sans serif or serif type font, whatever it is. So for you to add it in, I'll keep that in. I'll keep that in mind. We'll do that in another session where we add some simple fonts, or even bitmap fonts, if you want. Remember, there's no game loop here. All right, so it's not like you're playing a shoot 'em up game. It's not like that kind of game. It's an interface with buttons. It's really, that's what it is. And like I said before, this game has rules, right? And the rules I've already made for you. All the way, the rules of how to win, how to bet, and all that kind of stuff is here, right? It's not like you have to create the mechanic. It's how to take my code and translate it so it works in an interface. That's the challenge. Why? Because on your final exam, right, there's going to be something where I give you code, and if you haven't looked at people's code before, or my code before, and you have never done that, you know, because there's troubleshooting involved, there's testing involved, there's all kinds of stuff to figure out what the code is doing. It slows you down, right? So it's an opportunity for you guys to look at this thing and make it work. Okay? Any questions around this thing? I know there's not going to be, of course. No one's going to say anything until, you know, the time comes when you're trying this out and it doesn't work, right? But what would I do? What would I do here? How would I start off? My recommendation is you do something like this, and I'll give you a hint about how to put this thing together, right? Because the biggest problem with this whole thing in any kind of game is, how do I start, right? How do I start? I want to put a background image in here of my slot machine. That's how I would start if it was me, right? So I would start off, right? And this is the hint I'm going to give you, and then we'll stop talking about it, right? What I want to do is, in the form itself, I'm just going to kind of take this out here. It has a background image property, right? There it is. That's how easy it is. I'm going to choose, now notice I've already set my background image layout to zoom, right? Because that way it'll scale to whatever I have in here, right? I'm going to choose the background image as slot machine. It's that simple. Here it is, slot machine, right? I've already got the slot machine. Press OK. Bam, it's there. And notice the button's even positioned properly, right? So it looks like a slot machine now. But the problem is that if I put some picture boxes here, and if I start this thing off, right, depending on your Windows 10, sometimes some weird stuff happens where, you know, things get repositioned all over the place, right? So I've done a little bit of pre-work for you just to help you out. And one of the things I've done is, like I said, inside my background image, I've said that the background image layout is zoom, which is the proper layout, okay? And I've also taken this the kind of auto font size, what it does automatically, auto scale mode to none. You don't want this thing to auto scale ever, right? If you set it to auto scale something, like for example, if I set it to my font or my DPI or something else, it'll never be right, because my DPI is different than your DPI. My font size is different than your font size. So always set this thing to none, right? That's what I recommend. That'll help you in terms of absolute positioning, okay? Also, I've set it up so that this thing here, the maximize box doesn't work, which you would probably want not to work, right? And I've also set already the form border to fixed single, so it doesn't, you can't scale it. So when I run this thing again, you can see that, and this is the freebie for you. Now this isn't the points. There's no marks here, right? Because I got nothing layered on top of it. For you to get the marks, your labels and everything else should be positioned in the right places when this thing pops up. That's how you get your marks. So that's the challenge. How do you do that, right? Seems easy, but try it out. Maybe it won't be so easy, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, if I'm using a slot machine image,
yeah,
they look okay to me.
Yeah.
But in your case, it could be a little off or something.
No, not if you use what I just showed you, it won't crop, right? Because I set out so it doesn't auto scale. If you put auto scale to some auto scale mode to like a font or DPI or something, then it will. Then yours will be different than mine every time. And I never asked for that. In assignment 1, 2, 3, 4, I never said anything about it because I didn't care about it. Now I need to care about it because my interface has to be very specific. So there's two possibilities here. Don't auto scale, or two, here's the second possibility, which is way harder, okay? Use some kind of table layout, right? Where you lay out everything in a table and you align them to the background image. Good luck on that one. That is really hard to do, okay? Because you have to kind of specify absolute positioning for each of your table, like the grid, so it kind of functions properly. And then you can drag and drop your labels, like we've shown you before when we did that little calculator, right? So a couple possibilities here. For Unity, right? And I want to talk about this a little bit as well. There's only one scene you have to worry about in Unity. Unity has a container called scenes. And if I was going to show you this for 1 second, do you have a question before I go to Unity, by the way? Yeah, anybody? Okay. So I'm gonna hold this here for a second. We'll come back to this. But if I go to Unity, and if I want to kick off this this project, right? Again, there's a couple of ways to do this in Unity, right? And we haven't really talked too much about it. But I'm going to click on New Project in Unity. Now there's two possibilities. I can do a 2D layout if that's what you want, because on our Windows form, it's a 2D form. That's what it is, right? So I could choose 2D. 2D is definitely easier than 3D. For you to do a 3D slot machine, you have to have a mesh. You have to have some kind of polygonal model that you're going to use, right? 2D doesn't require that, right? So if I want 2D, let's try this. So I'll say slot machine 2D. Yes, you could. There's definitely things that you can do that. But remember, the challenge is, how do you make everything work? How do you make stuff appear in the windows? It's not easy in Unity to make it do in 3D mesh. 3D mesh is a real challenge for you guys. If you do that, I'll give you extra bonus points. But it has to be your assets. Please don't download a slot machine from the asset store. That would just 0 for that, right? There's actually slot machines in the asset store. You can just download them. They're ready to go, right? Don't download that, because you're gonna get 0 for that. I know about them, right? You're not gonna fool me about it. Don't do that, right? So let's say I'm gonna kick off Unity for 2D. I'm gonna create a project. And in Unity, the major thing for Unity is to keep organized, okay? The user interface is a lot different than it is for Visual Studio. And usually what I like to do with Unity is to align it, and I'm just going to do this really briefly, and then I'll stop talking about Unity, because it's really for people who really want to research and get this done on their own, right? But if you notice, I have my scene and I have my game. A lot of times what I like to do is just focus on my scene itself. In the 2D scene, my main camera is orthographic, right? Orthographic means flat. So there's no perspective in the camera whatsoever, right? So it's a flat image. What you want to do is you want to align this camera. Now, right now it's free aspect. That's how this is done, right? So if I look at my game, the ratio is free aspect. You can also choose a ratio, 16:9 or whatever you want to do. I recommend free aspect. It'll work on most devices this way, right? If you really want to be specific for a mobile device, make one. Like if you want to do on an iPhone or something like that, that's 320 by 480 is typically the proportions, something like that. And you can create a ratio that way. But here in free aspect, your slot machine will flow. My camera doesn't have anything. I need my slot machine graphics to be part of things. And the first thing that I want to do is this is the viewable area. I have several tabs here that I can get in Unity. And I can see them all inside my window. If I want to get my scene tab, I can go here and click on my scene. If I want my services or game or inspector or whatever, it's all here in the Windows tab in Unity, right? On the right, you have something called a hierarchy, which is all the game objects that are physically in your game at runtime, right? Here, the inspector is contextual, and whatever you're clicking on, in this case, the main camera, it shows you your properties in the inspector. That's what you're doing here, really quickly. Now, I've set up this layout, and it's really a 2x3 layout, right? If you look at layouts, you can choose 2x3, and it's something that looks like this. And all these tabs are draggable. You can rip off a tab like this one, as an example, the project tab, which tells you all your project assets, and you can move it around. Or you can make it so that it layers underneath the other one. Not a problem. Okay, they're all rippable and draggable and stuff. Okay, so what do I do in Unity? I recommend setting up your folders correctly the first time, and I recommend doing something like this. Create a folder for your scripts. And I use the underscore so it appears at the top of my assets, so scripts. And same thing with your scenes. So create another folder for your scenes. When I have my scenes and my scripts, I want to save my scene, and I'm going to do Control-S to save. It's going to ask me where my scene is. I'm going to locate it in my scenes folder inside the assets folder. And inside there, I'm just going to choose whatever the scene is called. We'll call this the main scene. What is a scene? A scene is a container that contains your game. Each scene is like a level. Each scene is a game world with unlimited boundaries. Right? Truly, well, limited to your computer, right? And the scene starts off in the middle at 0, 0, right? 0, 0, 0, actually. Here, because we're using a 2D scene, it's only taking into account the X and Y coordinates, right? So in the middle is 0, 0. Okay, the camera is looking at the scene. This is what the camera sees. And if I look at the game itself, it's blank, it's blue, because the camera sees nothing right now. There's nothing in the scene itself. So anything I put in the hierarchy can be viewed by the camera depending on its position, right? Okay, let's add in all my assets, because I have a bunch of assets, right? So if I look at my assets, here's my slot machine. And I want to drag and drop all these assets I have under slot machine, right? I have in my resources, I have all these assets. They're GIF files, GIF images, right? And some of them are pings. So I'm going to take all these assets. These are all the ones in my in this resource, and I want to pull them in here. But before I go in there, they got to go somewhere. So I want to create an area that I have all my sprites or my textures, if you will. So you can make a folder called images or sprites or whatever. I like to call them textures because that's what they are. They're bitmap textures. Okay? And I'm going to pull all my assets in there. So I'm going to kind of go back in here and drag and drop and pull them all in. It's going to convert them so that they're usable. Now I've got all my assets in my game, right? All the stuff that's inside my textures, right? Well, now that I have that, I can always pull something in there. For example, I want my slot machine, right? So here's my slot machine asset. I want to pull that into my game. And what it does is it creates my slot machine. It's not like that difficult, right? But, and this is what I actually see. The game itself looks like this now. So if I run the game in Unity, right? My slot machine. It's ready to go, right? Challenge is, how do I layer stuff on top of here? How do I make things appear in these areas? Well, you have to make additional game objects that kind of layer on top of this thing. And each of these textures or sprites has something called an order in layer. Right now, the order in layer for this one is 0, which means it's the bottom layer. And if I want to add something on top of this, an example of if I had a blank, and I want to layer it on top of this right here, right? So here's my blank in my scene. This is the actual blank image. And if I want to move this over here, and I want it to show up as on my scene, I have to change my order in layer to at least 1. Otherwise, it would appear in the same position. So building your game in Unity is going to be a bit more challenging, right? But the great thing about Unity is it has all your animation effects built in, and it'll take all your C# code. All the C# code I just gave you, it'll all work with Unity. The only thing that won't happen is you have to create all that button. The UI you have to put together is a totally different UI, right? So you have to make the UI function. So there's a bit of research for someone who's doing the game for Unity. This is the 2D version, all right? If you want to make a 3D game, you need 3D model, right? That's a slot machine. And it has to look like 3D. So chances are you're going to have an arm on your slot machine that you're probably going to pull, or some buttons that you're going to press. And you need to have all that animation and effect and everything else. It's much more difficult. Once we add that extra dimension, all of a sudden it becomes like 10 times more difficult to do properly, right? Because you need lighting, texturing, materials, all kinds of other stuff involved, and plus all the calculations that you have to do, right? Again, all optional for people who are interested. It's not required, nor will I test you on this. There's not going to be a Unity test at the end of this semester, okay? It's just for people, because we're doing rapid application development. This is yet another avenue, because Unity can deploy to iOS, Android, Xbox, PS4, Windows, Linux, Mac. It has a lot of deployment options, right? So it's way more flexible than Visual Studio. And there's some limitations as well. Questions about the Unity build, if you're interested. Who's interested in doing Unity? Anyone's going to do it? I know you are. You might can do it. You might do the game. I really would, I'm recommending, unless you really want to challenge yourself, Unity is hard. Even though it looks easy and you know you kind of figure it out, Gabe, it's hard. It's not as easy as you think, right? Yeah, even 2D is going to be hard, right? Yeah. Anyone else? So I got a couple people. Anyone else? I don't want to cater too much to only 2. So there's 3 people that want to do it. Okay, that's fine. Again, you get the same marks, still worth 20% of your final mark to do this thing. It's a good opportunity for you to do a little bit of research. I can't cover all of it because this course isn't about it's not about Unity, it's rapid application development. However, I will have, for those people who are interested, a Unity hour every week for the next few weeks. That means that people who are not interested in Unity can take off after a couple hours, all right, or work on something else, right, if they want to. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit of a work period over the next couple of, you're eating? The next couple of weeks, up until the last week, Week 13, when we get together, that's the week before exam, we're going to do a bit of a review. And I'm going to talk about what's on the exam, right? Because I'll have more of visibility of what is it, how much is it worth, and so on. So I'll give you that week 13. Next week, week 12, we're going to do an hour of special topics, and then it's going to be a work session. So when you come in, you can work on your slot machine if you want. Some people may choose to elect not to come in because they're like, hey, free period. Please don't do that. Please come in so I can help you with your problems. There are going to be problems with your slot machine. You're going to have issues, guaranteed, right? Not because I want you to, because you're going to be testing and you're not going to know how to do something, especially if you're a Unity person, right? So, so please come in next week and I'll help you out, right? Week 13, same thing. We'll do about an hour of review and the rest will be a work session, right? There'll be a little bit of stuff that I'm going to give you over the next couple of weeks, but I've taught you most of the things that you know. We're way ahead of the other classes, right? So all the things you need to know for rapid application development up till now, file handling and everything else, I've taught you. Today, the only thing we're going to cover more than anything else is something called visual inheritance, which is something we're going to cover. You're shaking your head? You don't like visual inheritance? Sorry. I might have a fork, but you have to wash it. All right. So that's what this is all about. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll get right into visual inheritance. Okay?